A note to the listeners, episode 14 of No Extra Words contains some explicit language and mature content. "1001 Reasons to Love Rachel Maddow" by Zachary Hay. The young man entered a classroom in the late 2000s at the University of Southern Wyoming, where he met a young woman who, to the boy's pleasure, resembled a young Rachel Maddow in both appearance and in personality. And the young woman, upon beginning flirtations, had chirped with joy when she learned that the young man was also a fan of Nora Ephron and the color burgundy, and had a distaste for postmodern recreations of soup cans, and also liked that the young man discussed art and art theories without ever using the words bourgeois or esoteric. And that joy continued when the young man and the young woman agreed that jalapeno peppers were the most underrated pizza topping, and that the Red House movie theater was shabby but cute, and perfect for the indie movies it played. And both wondered if they fell into the category of hipster for saying such a thing, but agreed that it didn't matter, and if they liked it, they liked it. And so that very same joy grew sometime later when the young couple decided that a corgi was the best breed of dog for their modest home, even though it had those fucked up little sausage legs and couldn't climb the stairs without help. And when that same corgi died 10 years later, the couple decided it would probably be best if their daughter, now 7, got not only to pick out the new pet, which would turn out to be a rabbit, but also to name it. And so 3 months later, the family welcomed Doc McStuffins the bunny to their Midwestern home. And all seemed well for the family, especially the young man, who had made partner at the firm and was soon to be investing in a car wash business not far from home, which he promised wouldn't take up too much of his time. But of course it did, and that was why the young man wasn't all that surprised when he found a startlingly younger and almost disturbingly handsome man thrusting into his wife on a Saturday afternoon, in the backyard, on the picnic table, where the man would occasionally, if the weather was suitable, have lunch with his daughter and feed the birds. And then, to everyone's surprise, the young man found himself the next day begging the young woman not to leave and to seek marriage counseling, and the young man didn't understand, since he was the victim here, right? Why the young woman left, and why his daughter had gone too, and why the little girl actually preferred spending her afternoons at Mommy's house when she could get away with nearly anything at Daddy's. And as he found himself saying once or twice, usually when he had a couple drinks in him, which was more common than he liked to admit, that he loved her more than Mommy did. But that whole issue was irrelevant in just 10 short years, when the little girl, now a young woman herself, decided that her father was actually the more emotionally sturdy parent, and that her mother only loved her if it didn't get in the way of a man's attention, which was more and more rare the older she got. And so, when a mutual respect between man and daughter was established, everything in the young man's life seemed to find a new balance, as he was told would happen as he grew older, but never believed, too set in the slings and arrows of early adulthood to understand the way life really works. But always hoped for as he lied in bed at night and dreamed of another woman coming along, and maybe investing in a pot-bellied pig to keep him company. But those things never came, nor did they feel as important as he found the content of old age, and a melancholy in hearing of the destruction of the Red House movie theater, and a newfound appreciation for Andy Warhol, and a twinge of heartbreak every time he came across an old picture of the lovely and smart Rachel Maddow from before her 2028 presidential run, and a head painfully full of memories of a life that seemed to slip by. And slip by, and slip by. 5 billion years later, the sun exploded, and everyone shrugged it off as a growing pain. As always, watch this space. Hello there! Welcome to No Extra Words, the Flash Fiction podcast. My name is Chris Baker-Dersch. I'm your producer and editor. And I'm about to make a big confession. This episode makes me feel old. That's a good thing. I'm kind of getting to that age where I'm realizing that the generation that's about to make a big difference in the world is not mine. It's the one that's coming behind me, which is sort of a weird feeling that I think every generation goes through. I have been hearing lately everywhere this whole, there's a collision of minds in the workplace, and the Gen Xers and the millennials and the baby boomers are all colliding, and there's this new generation that is thinking like generations have never thought before, which is sort of weird. I, again, don't want to go into all kinds of personal details, but suffice it to say, I don't live happily in either Gen X or millennial. I'm kind of in that no man's land in between and don't really fit in with either. which is kind of funny because I think that's what my dad always felt about the baby boomers. He's not really a boomer, but he's kind of on the edge of being a boomer, so sort of repeats generationally, I guess. But all that to say that there is a whole younger generation that is coming up behind us that is getting a lot of flack right now. And I honestly think we're just not giving them a chance to do what every single generation before them has done, which is to have their moment where they're in their 20s. This week's episode features stories by younger writers and or about younger characters. When I first read Zach's story that you just heard, it came to me the way a lot of stories come to me. He submitted it through noextrawords.wordpress.com. And I read the first 2 lines of it and I was like, this is just one giant run-on sentence. I am totally going to reject this. But for some reason I kept reading and I realized I need to be a lot less narrow-minded about format because I kept trying to reject the story and it wouldn't leave me alone because it was this life of this man in one ongoing sentence, which is just coming at you, sort of like life does. And it actually is a really cool story. And when I got Zach's bio and read that he was born in 1994 when I was in high school, I thought, of course, he's not of my generation. Maybe I'm not the target audience for this, but that doesn't make it any less of a cool story or any less of a cool innovation. And so a couple weeks after I initially read Zach's story, I was revising the submission guidelines on the website and I almost wrote no poetry. And then I stopped myself because I realized, again, I'm being narrow-minded about format. The cool thing about flash fiction is that it can be anything and it can play with form. It can be all dialogue. It can be maybe in a poetic form, or it can be all one sentence like Zach's story. And I need to let my own inhibitions about all that stuff go and be an appreciator of literature rather than a grammar Nazi. That said, I encourage you writers out there to play with format a little bit. I don't think everybody should write everything in just one sentence. That worked for Zach, but I think he's inspiring me to think about what literature looks like and to think about what the rules are and how I can break them. And then, next up comes So Bored by Jake Bible, which has this younger character's voice in it, this sort of, I think of her as a teenager, talking about how completely bored you are. It's got that voice to it. Jake Bible is a ton of fun. I actually found him through his podcast, which is Right in Suburbia. And the thing I love about his podcast is in this era of these heavily produced This American Lifestyle podcasts, which I love and I'm a huge fan of, he's not that at all. He's this old school guy talking into a microphone podcast, and it's great. It's just all about writing and being a professional writer. And if you can make doing your taxes sound interesting, that makes you a good storyteller. And that's Jake all over the place. And then I found out he writes microfiction. By the way, this is just an aside. If you are somebody who likes to scrounge around the internet and look for flash fiction, I may be the only person who does that. But if you are that person, Fridays are your day. You can follow the Flash Friday hashtag on Twitter. A lot of people do sort of a Flash Friday post. And in Jake's case, he does the Friday night drabble party. So every Friday night, he puts up a piece of microfiction just for free for anybody to read. Jake is a really prolific writer. He writes a lot of middle grade and young adult horror sci-fi type stuff that my students would have loved when I was a school librarian. But anyway, his Friday night drabble stuff is just from a pro writer, free stuff that he just throws out there for anybody. And So Bored was one of those, and he was so nice to let us share it. And I love, love, love the voice of it because I'm somebody who used to work at a middle school, and it was very, very familiar. Last up today is one of those episodes where you get 3 stories by 3 different contributors. Next week will be one as well, spoiler alert. But last up today is a story by Angela Luo. Angela wins the award for being our youngest contributor to date. She is still in high school, and I wish that I was half as talented or half as brave as Angela when I was in high school to write this kind of work and submit it out into the world to be published or broadcast or whatever it is we're calling this. But out of order, I was a lot like this kid, and I have a feeling I'm not the only one. So I will leave it at that to let you listen. But I thought about a lot of names for this episode because, again, it's making me feel really old. And I went on a Pepsi tangent. It's the voice of the new generation. And then I thought that's stupid. But I also looked at these stories, and because we're all about format today and talking about Zach's story being one endless sentence and Jake's story being microfiction and all of that, I love the different formats that make these stories stick out from one another. The first one is in third person with this one endless sentence. The second one is in first person, and then Angela Luo actually tells her story in second person, which is not an easy form to write in, but is really awesome, especially for YA, if you can do it well. And so today's episode is him, me, you, and it is all about these different perspectives and these different voices. And again, I sound like an old person, but I feel like an old person today. This is the next generation of writers, and it's really fun to get to showcase them on the show. So please check out their bios on our website, noextrawords.wordpress.com. They're doing fabulous things out in the world, and you should follow them and see what they're up to. And we're going to get back to the stories. Up next, Jake Bible's So Bored. Have a great week. So Bored by Jake Bible. We've been on this planet for 83 days now. I am so bored. Littleton has figured out how to recycle our urine so it is semi-palatable. Okay, it's not even close to palatable, but at least it's cold. Foster has confirmed that the tuber-like plants are not edible. He died about an hour ago. I set half our oxygen supply on fire accidentally, so there's that. Have I mentioned I'm bored? What the hell is Collier doing over there? Oh, seriously? So bored. I wonder if I can get Littleton and Collier to fight. Let's find out. Disclaimer, even cold, urine still tastes like piss. Out of Order by Angela Luo. Back then you liked books more than people. Or maybe it was that books just liked you more than other people did. Except your mother, of course. You distinctly remember your mother straightening out your yellow sundress, beaming, "You are my sunshine," and sending you out the door with a kiss. It was the only encouragement you got on your first day of 5th grade. The only knowledge you had of your father were the paper checks that came in the mail. Today was a new school, but nothing new. You were 10, yet you had done this 4 times before. You knew the routine. Keep your head in your book, and nobody will bother you. Maybe it was funny that books were the literal representation of the walls you had built around yourself, but it was true. You didn't make friends, didn't like to make friends, because they always seemed to turn around and stab you in the back. Not books, though. Books were your friends. Life to you had become a Ferris wheel. Going up and down, a never-ending cycle, and the moment you reached the peak, you were tumbling down toward the ground again. Only today your Ferris wheel actually stopped. You were walking up the steps of the bus, trying to balance your tiny feet as your eyes drunk in the words of the great J.K. Rowling. You were so absorbed in brilliant Hogwarts that you didn't feel the tap on your shoulder. What are you reading? You looked up to find a boy your age, pale hair and a dark face with a jolly smile that neutralized his large frame. In all 11 years of your life, you had never had anyone, let alone a boy, talk to you voluntarily. This was all new, too new, and you didn't know if you liked it. Harry Potter? Was your shy little answer? The boy nodded. I like Harry Potter, too. You didn't know what to do next. He didn't ask you a question. Do you continue talking? Do you walk away? Do you sit down? This wasn't supposed to happen. This was not one of the seats of your Ferris wheel. You felt stuck, and this blonde boy with his rusty face was the rusty bolt to the Ferris wheel of your routine. So you do the only thing you know how to do when your wheel stops working. You fix it and get back on track, back to your routine of up and down, up and down. You semi-nod at the boy and relocate the spot where you left off in your book, moving to an isolated seat near the back. Now this felt right. This was routine. Do you want to sit with me? His voice rang out again, and just like that, you were thrown off your Ferris wheel again. Okay, you nodded out of politeness. Your mother's words rang out. Try to make some friends, honey. So you sat down next to him. Gabriel. You didn't talk much after. You used your book as a physical shield between you and the boy. When the bus pulled up to the front of the school, you were the first one out of your seat. You didn't say anything to Gabriel, and he didn't say anything to you, not that it mattered. He was just a rusty bolt on your Ferris wheel that you were desperate to get rid of. But unfortunately for you, the next day your Ferris wheel rutted to a stop. Again. And in just the same spot, too. He even sat in the exact same seat with that same face and haircut. "Hi," he said this time. You looked up from your book to see the same ear-splitting grin stretched across his face. This time you sat down next to him on your own accord. "What are you reading now?" he smiled. Gosh, that smile. Did he always smile? Why was he always happy? His smile grew even bigger, if that was even possible, and it bothered you for unknown reasons. You shrugged and showed him the cover of your new book, Charlotte's Web. "Is it good?" You nodded. Gabriel seemed to understand that you didn't want to talk to him, so he stopped too and looked out the window. You shifted uncomfortably in your seat, trying to focus on the words in front of you. Why was this guy so nice to you? You couldn't understand. You weren't supposed to make friends. Those were the stubborn rules that delineated your life, disregarding the advice your mother had given to you. There was room for only one person on your Ferris wheel, and that person was you. But what happened when someone else tried to get on your one-person Ferris wheel? There simply was no room for them, and the more they tried to squeeze into the single seat, the more suffocated you felt. So what did you do? You kicked them out. The Ferris wheel was closed.